You know, history isn't just about telling stories of the past. If you look closely enough, you'll find that it's packed with blueprints, detailed plans for solving some of our most modern problems. And this story? Well, this is one of the best. It's about how a crippling disadvantage, something everyone pointed to as a fatal flaw, was completely flipped on its head and turned into an absolutely unstoppable force. So this isn't just about an old warplane. Not really. It's a guide for finding the hidden power in the very things that people tell you should be holding you back.
So, let's just pause and make this a little personal for a second. Think about something you're working on, or maybe even something about yourself that always seems to draw criticism. You know, that one thing that you might even secretly believe is your biggest flaw? Okay, got it? Now hold that thought and ask yourself this. What if that's not a weakness at all? What if it's the key to everything, just in disguise? For a group of young, frankly terrified American pilots back in 1943, the answer to that very question came in the form of a 7-ton fighter plane that by all logic was supposed to be their coffin.
All right, let's set the scene. It is early 1943. The air war over Europe is just a brutal, unforgiving meat grinder. American bomber crews are being chewed up and spit out on a daily basis. They're being decimated. And into this absolute chaos comes the 56th Fighter Group, and they're bringing with them a brand new airplane, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. And the reaction from everyone? Let's just say it was not good. In fact, its own pilots were scared to death of it. One of the future aces, a guy named Robert S. Johnson, he actually wrote in his diary that he was completely convinced he would not survive his first week of combat in this new machine. That's how bad it was.
And this, right here, this really gets at the sheer contempt that people had for this plane. You have to put yourself in their shoes. The Allied pilots, especially those battle-hardened veterans from Britain's RAF, they had learned one single bloody lesson. Agility is life. Their machine, the sleek, nimble Spitfire, could turn on a dime. And then this thing shows up, this enormous, barrel-shaped aircraft. They just laughed at it. They openly mocked it, calling it a milk bottle. But the nickname that really stuck was the Jug, which was short for Juggernaut, and I promise you that was not a compliment. It was a joke. It was a label for an oversized, clumsy beast that had no business being in a real dogfight.
And this chart just spells it out plain as day. Look at the raw numbers. The P-47 weighed in at almost 14,000 pounds. That is 2 full tons heavier than the legendary Spitfire. It was about 3,000 pounds heavier than its main German opponent, the incredibly agile Focke-Wulf 190. So just imagine you're a 22-year-old pilot. You know your life depends on being able to outturn the guy trying to kill you, and your commanders hand you the keys to the heaviest, clumsiest fighter in the entire sky. You'd think it was a death sentence. And for a while, they all did.
But here's where the whole story pivots. Because the plane's designer, a brilliant Georgian immigrant named Alexander Kardavelli, he knew something that nobody else did. He'd heard all the jokes, all the criticisms. He even told a colleague once, with a bit of a smile, it may be a dinosaur, but it is a dinosaur with good proportions. Because he had intentionally, deliberately, designed this massive airframe for one reason: to hide a revolutionary secret. A piece of technology that was about to change the entire equation of the air war.
And this was the secret weapon, buried deep in the belly of the beast, the turbo supercharger. Now don't let the technical name throw you off. The concept is actually pretty simple. I want you to think of it as a monstrous set of mechanical lungs. See, as any plane climbs, the air gets thinner and thinner. A normal engine starts to choke. It starts gasping for oxygen, losing power with every foot. But this system, it captured the engine's blistering hot exhaust, used that gas to spin a turbine at insane speeds, and then force-fed dense, compressed air right back into the engine. So the Thunderbolt's engine didn't just breathe at high altitude, it roared.
And what was the result of that roar? An operational ceiling of over 42,000 feet. That number is everything. This altitude, this was the P-47's private kingdom. Because up there, above 30,000 feet, where those elegant Spitfires and agile FW-190s became sluggish and started gasping for air, the Thunderbolt was just getting warmed up. It was faster, it climbed better, it was utterly dominant. And here's the kicker. The plane's greatest perceived weakness, its huge size and weight, wasn't a flaw at all. It was a necessary consequence of housing the very system that gave it this untouchable, secret strength. So it's one thing to have a secret weapon, right? But it's something else entirely to figure out how to actually use it. And the key that would finally unlock the Thunderbolt's true potential? Well, it wasn't found in an engineering manual. It wasn't taught in a classroom. No, it was discovered by pure accident. during a series of absolutely terrifying near-fatal test flights back in the States.
Okay, I want you to put yourself in the cockpit for a second. You're a test pilot, 35,000 feet up. Your job is to push this machine to its absolute breaking point. So you roll over into a steep, near-vertical dive. The wind is just screaming. The airspeed indicator needle whips past 500, 550 miles per hour. It's time to pull out. So you pull back on the control stick, and nothing happens. It doesn't move. It's locked solid, like it's set in concrete. The plane is now a 7-ton bullet plunging toward the earth, and you are no longer a pilot. You are just a passenger. This is exactly what happened to pilots like Harold Comstock and Roger Dyer. They were the first to experience the terrifying laws of physics known as compressibility, where the air moving over the wings goes haywire and basically makes the plane completely unresponsive.
I mean, by all logic, those men should have died. But through a combination of sheer luck and unbelievable nerve, they figured out a recovery technique that defied every single survival instinct a pilot has. Instead of pulling back harder on the stick, which did nothing, the secret, unbelievably, was to push forward, to actually push the nose down even further into the dive. And then you had to have the courage to just wait, to let the plane fall into the thicker, denser air thousands of feet below, and only then would the controls slowly, agonizingly come back to life. They had stumbled upon a deadly flaw, and somehow turned it into a repeatable, if absolutely horrifying maneuver. So now we've got the pieces. We have the high-altitude performance, and we have this terrifying yet survivable high-speed dive. But a terrifying quirk on a test flight is one thing. A systematic weapon of war is something else entirely. It took a brilliant and very demanding leader to look at this seemingly suicidal dive and see not a flaw, but a revolutionary tactic. And that man was Colonel Hubert Zemke, the commander of the 56th Fighter Group. He was the one who realized that if his pilots could master this terrifying ability, they would literally be untouchable.
And Zemke didn't just give his pilots some friendly advice. No, he gave them an entirely new rulebook for air combat. He ordered them to forget everything they thought they knew about dogfighting. The central rule, the one he drilled into their heads relentlessly, was this: you will never turn with an FW-190, ever. Instead, the doctrine was brutally simple. You use your superior engine to climb high above your enemy, way up in your private kingdom. When you see a target, you roll over and you dive, vertically. You build up unstoppable speed, you fire one devastating burst from your 8 massive 50 caliber machine guns, and then you use all that immense energy to zoom right back up to the safety of high altitude, leaving the enemy completely helpless, wondering what just happened.
And the proof that this radical new idea actually worked? Well, it came with shocking speed. The very first confirmed kill using the dive happened on June 12th. Just 2 months later, during the infamous and bloody Schweinfurt-Regensburg bomber raid, the 56th used these tactics on a massive scale, just tearing into the German fighter formations and saving countless American lives. And then, in October, Robert S. Johnson, remember him? The same pilot who was sure he'd die in his first week? He became an ace in a single 25-minute fight, shooting down 3 enemy fighters with 3 separate, perfectly executed diving attacks. The theory was now undeniable fact.
Now, this new doctrine required an almost fanatical belief in the airplane itself, and boy, did the P-47 earn that belief. On one mission, Johnson's plane got ambushed and was just utterly shredded. We're talking over 200 bullet and cannon shell holes. His canopy was shattered, his hydraulic lines were severed, the cockpit was literally on fire, but that dinosaur of an airframe held together. That massive radial engine, an air-cooled marvel, just kept pulling. He flew that wreck all the way from Germany back to England and landed it. That incredible ruggedness, that was the psychological bedrock. That's what gave these pilots the guts to dive headfirst into hell, knowing their jug could take the punishment and, more often than not, bring them home.
So what did this look like from the other side? For the German pilots, it was pure psychological warfare. Imagine you're a Luftwaffe pilot. You're climbing to attack the bombers, feeling confident in your superior, agile FW-190, and then suddenly your wingman just explodes, vanishes. You look up into the sun and you see these huge American fighters plunging down nearly vertically at speeds you didn't think were physically possible. You can't outdive them, they're too heavy. You can't follow them back up, their engines are just too powerful at that altitude. As the German ace Heinz Knoke later wrote, all you could do was watch them come down and just hope to God they were aiming at someone else.
So, what happens? What are the actual results when you fully commit to turning a perceived weakness into your primary weapon? Well, the pilots of the 56th Fighter Group, the guys who were once ridiculed for flying milk jugs, they became the single most successful and the most feared American fighter unit in the entire European theater.
period. I mean, the data is just staggering. It speaks for itself. Over the course of the war, for every single P-47 that the 56th Fighter Group lost in air-to-air combat, they destroyed 11.2 enemy aircraft. Now, to put that into perspective for you, a 2-to-1 or maybe a 3-to-1 kill ratio was considered excellent. This was a level of dominance that was simply unheard of. And it was all achieved by an aircraft that everyone, absolutely everyone, had written off as a complete failure.
But wait, because it gets even better. When analysts went back and isolated only the fights where the pilots followed Zemke's doctrine to the absolute letter, no mistakes, no giving in to that temptation to turn and fight, just pure, disciplined diving attacks, that kill ratio jumped to an unbelievable 15-to-1. Discipline wasn't just a suggestion, it was the key that unlocked the plane's ultimate lethal potential.
And on a perfect day, with the right altitude advantage, with the element of surprise and a coordinated attack, well, under those ideal conditions, the ratio approached a truly mind-bending 19-to-1. I mean, think about that. That is the ultimate payoff. This is what happens when you stop fighting your own nature and instead you lean into it with everything you have. The Thunderbolt's weight was never a flaw. It was the engine of its victory.
And of course, this new way of fighting created legends. Men like Francis Gabreski, Robert Johnson, David Schilling. These guys became the highest-scoring American aces in the war against Germany. And they didn't do it by being the best classic dogfighters. No, they became something new. They became masters of physics. They were the masters of the dive.
So, why does all this matter? I mean, beyond just being a fascinating war story. It matters because the success of the P-47 and the 56th wasn't just tactical, it was profoundly strategic. Their total dominance at high altitude helped shatter the German Air Force. It established the air superiority that made the D-Day landings and the end of the war even possible. And in the process, they proved that victory doesn't always go to the one with the most elegant or conventional tool. It goes to the one who has the best blueprint for the tool they actually have.
You know, I think Francis Gabreski, the top ace himself, he really summed up this entire story perfectly. He said, "We stopped trying to turn with German fighters. We started using our real advantages. Suddenly, we were winning." It's so simple, but it is so profound. They stopped trying to force the P-47 to be something it wasn't, a nimble little dogfighter. And instead, they started embracing what it was, the fastest diving, most rugged, high-altitude monster in the sky. They changed their mindset, not the machine.
And that brings us full circle, right back to the beginning, right back to you. Because the story of the Thunderbolt, it's more than just history. It's a direct challenge to all of us. It forces us to look at our own lives, our careers, our personal challenges, and ask that same deeply uncomfortable question. Are we fighting the wrong battle? Are we trying to turn and twist and compete on the same terms as everyone else, when our real strength, our unique power, lies in a completely different dimension? So I'll leave you with this thought. Where is your hidden advantage? What is your diving attack that you've maybe overlooked simply because everyone else told you it was a weakness?